I don't mean to be...
are going to have to worry about is the expansion of Medicare fraud charges. So, according to this law, a person need not have actual knowledge nor specific intent to violate the healthcare law in order to commit healthcare fraud. So you don't have to know that you're doing it. You don't even have to know that there's a rule that says you can't do it. Intent is assumed. So, when Medicare passed as a law, there were 1,000 pages of rules and regulation for every 1 page of legislation in the Medicare law. The PPACA law has over 2,800 pages of legislation. And if you apply the same calculations, that would be 2.8 million pages of regulation. I put 1 million pages here because I thought it was kind of overwhelming. I put the whole amount. But probably 1 million pages of regulation, and we're supposed to know every word that's in it so that we know what to abide by. And if we can't do that or don't know how to interpret a rule or a regulation, we can be charged with fraud. There's actually not a single physician in the entire country who could not be charged with fraud, period. Do you do everything your doctor tells you to do? I don't do what my doctor tells me to do. So this law authorizes the Secretary of Health and Human Services, again, a lawyer, to adjust reimbursements to providers based on what they call quality measures. In other words, if you, as my patient, don't do what I tell you to do, and you don't get better, or maybe you get worse, and you come back to me, I won't get paid for that visit. If you're not better, I may not get paid. If that happens to a lot of my patients, then I might get kicked out of the system altogether. If I don't abide by their guidelines, I may not be allowed to play in their system as a physician. So, the interesting thing is that in none of these quality measures is patient compliance taken into consideration. So, they don't care that you didn't do what I told you to do or recommended that you do. All they know is that I must be a bad physician because you didn't do it.
I'm gonna stop right here because tort reform is not in the law, and I want to go back for a moment to a previous video and emphasize the IPAB that Kathy brought up. So if you'll just give me a minute.
While she's getting that ready, I could mention something. I'm actually a French literature major, and I built 24, I did 3 subdivisions. Brookfield built 12 homes, 24 lots, and I have a little farm. I wouldn't practice with all this. I would go do something else.
The other one is the Independent Payment Advisory Board. So right now, you've heard about the doctor fix or the sustainable growth rate, and we'll talk about that in more depth later. And that's controlled by Congress. So Congress is supposed to decide what the reimbursement will be to physicians. According to Kathleen Sebelius, if the Congress can't get the job done, they've instituted the Independent Payment Advisory Board, IPAB. This should scare everybody. This is a 15-member panel appointed by the President, does have to be approved by the Senate. It has the power to make law. In other words, a panel of non-elected officials has the power to make decisions that will actually become law. Not just rules and regulations, but actual law, without legislative, without going through the usual legislative process. So we talked about comparative effectiveness. It sets the price on it sets a price on the value of every year of your life, and if any treatment or diagnostic test exceeds that value, then you don't get it. Some of the ways that this law will bring in money.
That would be a good spot to stop. That is incredible what she just said.
Isn't that anti-constitutional? It's against the law.
Well, we always had to treat people equal of all ages, and it seems like it's going completely against that. But that's pretty amazing. You almost have to play that again.
How can non-elected officials make a law? Right.
That's anti-constitutional.
I know.
Hello, where are we living?
They're already doing it.
Well, let me say one thing about that. I don't know if you guys saw that just this week, President Obama wanted to move the Guantanamo Bay people out of there, because that was one of his campaign promises 4 years ago. So he wanted to buy Thompson Prison in Illinois for $165 million, and Congress said no. So the executive branch just went and bought it this week. Like, I know. I don't mean to knock him, because I think the Republicans are the same.
They've instituted the Independent Payment Advisory Board, IPAB. This should scare everybody. This is a 15-member panel appointed by the president, does have to be approved by the Senate. It has the power to make law. In other words, a panel of non-elected officials has the power to make decisions that will actually become law. Not just rules and regulations, but actual law, without legislative, without going through the usual legislative process. So we talked about comparative effectiveness. It sets the price on it sets a price on the value of every year of your life, and if any treatment or diagnostic test exceeds that value, then you don't get it.
Isn't that incredible? Some bureaucrats can decide you're not worth it. By the way, let me just touch on AMA, because we talked. I've never been in it. My dad was never in it. I've read that about 7% of doctors under age 40 are in the AMA, partly because it costs too much. We have to be in Fairfield County Medical. That's the disciplinary body, so to get a hospital rates. For another $100, you can be in Connecticut Medical Society, but it's about $1,400 if you go all the way up to AMA, so no one's in it. So I didn't want you guys to think that, but AMA is for this. AARP is for this. The hospitals are for it because it wipes out all their competition. The drug companies are for it. The insurance companies are for it. Sir?
The AARP got a special goodie from the government. It has to do with this tack on insurance, whatever, and it's going to bring them in millions of dollars.
There's always a reason, but they told President Obama after the debate, do not use our name again.
We're going to skip Dr. Vecchio's video for when we're talking about employers and jobs, but we do have some people here that I think can help us with that. We wanted to think about, is this new law going to stimulate our economy? Are employers going to expand their businesses? Will they take on new employees? So I saw Dave Partigliano. Is he still here? They both left. Okay, well, these expenses that these...
Will is there.
Yes. Will, would you like to take over? Do you want to just say a couple of words about employer, employee, the cost to the employer is what I'm basically looking for?
Okay, employer, employee. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Will Connor, and like Dr. Appleby, I'm also from Brookfield, and I didn't know that he was here prior, but before I do answer your question, Pam, I'd like to, when I saw that slide earlier that showed the value of the age 0 as being 0, 21 years ago is when I moved to Brookfield, and I remember it because my daughter's 21, and she was a preemie. She was in the womb. We determined that she was 4 months. She was developed at a rate that was 4 months retarded relative to what her growth should have been at that time. So it's called interuterine growth retardation. I'm sure Dr. Appleby knows about that. Anyway, so they said you have to basically either take steroids, the mother, my wife, take steroids to develop the child to a point where she could be breathe on her own and be born, or she would be born premature and have to go on life support. So we went up to Yale, and we had just our regular insurance. We went to Yale New Haven. They were great up there, and Julie stayed up there for 5 weeks before Christy was born. And it even got to a point where it was a little dicey because they were, apparently the risk of being sued is greater for if the mother dies than the infant or the baby unborn because of the insurance and the lawyers involved. So they wanted to have her even before she was completely ready. We basically fought them and said, no, we really want to continue taking the steroids. So anyway, bottom line is she was born naturally. She was able to breathe, and she's a senior up at UConn. And it was a life-changing event for me. And when I saw that slide that, you know, that process could be interrupted by a politician, I'm like, that would have, you know, I would have went off on that. But anyway, so I'm also now, as my practice, I'm a financial advisor for a regional firm. And my clients ask me quite frequently, you know, how do we invest in this? How do we plan for Obamacare? And unfortunately, because there's so many unintended consequences with the bill, I mean, we saw some of the intended consequences. They sound good. There's, you know, you can stay on your insurance till you're 26, your parents' insurance, and some of the things that we kind of already know about and that we've gone over. But there's a lot of unintended consequences, and as an advisor, I usually take a long-term approach with my clients. And typically, we have this thing called uncertainty, and it's, in fact, we say the only certainty is that there's certainty of uncertainty. So there's a lot of unknowns in terms of the bill because there's what, 140 new bureaucracies that are 159 that are scheduled to go in. So these are fully funded government panels that'll be paid employees, and they'll have insurance, and they'll determine more things that'll cost more money. And so there's a lot of areas. I think probably the theory that I support the most, and this is just me personally, I can't really speak for my firm. Regulations prohibit me from really taking any sides in anything that's at all political, which this subject tends to be very political, the way it was passed. But I think Columbia Research, who's our investment wing, they do, I don't know if you've heard of the Columbia Management, but they had a theory that what will happen is about in 2016, there's a good chance that everybody that's healthy won't buy the insurance because they can just pay the fine. And then when they do get sick, they'll join the high-risk insurance pool because they'll be able to buy insurance. And then when they do that, the cost to the insurers will be so great because everyone in the pool will be sick, and there will be so what will happen is it'll be very unprofitable for the insurance companies, and they'll basically get out of that line of business. I sell insurance now, and I sell long-term care insurance, and I know everybody's dropping long-term care insurance. MetLife, got out of the business. There's only a couple companies that'll still do it because the costs of healthcare are so great, and these kinds of things will drive them out of business. So again, like Dr. Appleby, I'm not a proponent for insurance companies. I'm just saying that they won't be able to survive if there's mandates that this bill provides down the road for them to insure people that are already sick. So what'll happen? Well, probably what'll happen is the government will have to kind of rescue that job from the insurance companies, and then we'll have that single payer system that folks were talking about. So it's kind of a backdoor way that we may end up there, right?
Yep.
All right, so thank you very much for listening to me, and hopefully you've learned something today.